Informal businesses in Cape Town are reportedly closing down due to an increase in extortion incidents in the Western Cape. GroundUp reports that street vendors, hair salons and other small businesses are shutting down due to extortionists demanding protection fees ranging from 500 to 1,000 rands from victims who make profits of 1,500 rands to 2,000 rands. For more on this story, we're joined by Nyanga Community Policing Forum Secretary Dumisani Qwebe and researcher at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, Jenni Irish-Qhobosheane. A very good evening to both of you. Thank you very much for your time. Just how bad is this situation, Dumisani?
Thank you very much for your time and the listeners. You know, it is a national crisis, the issue of the extortion, and it has been overdue, not attended very properly. It has got a negative impact towards the local economy. Hence, the people who are starting their own business started now to shut down their informal businesses because they have to pay the protection fee. Some of them, they are selling bananas. That we should be looking at is that here in South Africa, we've got good policies in terms of policing, but the problem that we're facing is an implementation of those policies. And we also lack of having an integrated approach in terms of addressing this issue of extortion. And it seems that we are all waiting for more things to happen before we can take a plan of action. Remember, it's not only affecting the informal settlement. Also, the schools are being affected. Also, the church are being affected. Even the people who are going to work, some of them get affected in the issue of extortion. That means we are in crisis in South Africa. What is important for us is to work together to ensure that we've got an integrated.
I suppose, Jenni, I mean, small-time criminals who see or sit and watch sort of more affluent areas being terrorized by gangs where there's supposed to be better and more resourced police and other infrastructure would indeed feel inspired. And who else do they turn to? You know, the more vulnerable person who sells vegetables, who sells sweets and the like.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing is an exponential growth in extortion around the country, whether you're talking about Khayelitsha and Nyanga, Alexandra here in Mamelodi. It's happening everywhere at the moment. And what we're seeing is that some of it is highly organized, where you have organized syndicates that are making a fortune out of this extortion. And then you have some copycat extortion that is taking place, particularly targeting things like churches and schools, etc. But a lot of the people targeting the businesses, and both formal and informal businesses, and even street vendors, are actually highly organized, often broken up into small cell gangs that feed into a larger organized network.
But Dumisani, I mean, you get. Okay, we seem to have lost Dumisani there. But, I mean, I was reading this report by like GroundUp, who are saying that they don't get, when they ask questions, they don't get answers. They get like test replies, we can't tell you what the police are busy doing, that we don't discuss our operations with the media.
You know, I do think that extortion has become a public issue. and that we need to be getting some answers as to what's happening. So if there are arrests being made, we need to know who is being arrested and what is happening in terms of the conviction rate. And I think also what we need to be requesting from the police is not only that very often you hear from police when you're talking about extortion that, yeah, but people are not reporting cases. So it's difficult for us to investigate. But if you take some of the extortion that is happening, I just want to give an example of Alex. You know that on particular days around the Alex Mall, people are coming, the groups involved in extortion are coming and extorting people. You can have proactive policing with the right intelligence and the right information to be able to target extortion even while it's happening. A lot of this extortion is happening in broad daylight with armed men coming into shops, going to street vendors and demanding, and often they have times of days, times of the weeks when they actually target people when you know you've got to have your money ready. So I think that we need to be looking at, the police need to be able to tell us how they are actually dealing with this issue effectively. But I think also we need to understand that the police are important and they need to deal with this, but the police alone can't solve the problem. The most effective initiatives internationally have been when they brought together different spheres of government, different levels of government, including the police and criminal justice system, but they've also brought together businesses and communities and enabled those businesses and communities, empowered them to be able to stand up to the extortionists. At this stage in the game, the only option that many people in communities have is to close down their businesses, either pay up or close down. And we need to look at mechanisms where we can embolden people to be able to stand up to the extortionists. But that requires a concerted effort from all the different tiers, all the different spheres of government, the criminal justice system, working in concert with the business communities, both formal and informal, and with the communities themselves who are prepared to stand up and say, not in our name.
Dumisani, I mean, you are one of those people who volunteer their time and everything at huge risk as community policing forums who are there to assist the police. What do they say when you raise these issues with them in your particular context and locality?
Thank you very much, Rubuyo. You know, when we speak to SAPS, there's always a plan of action in addressing the issue of extortion. I agree with Jenni when she said we need a proactive crime intelligence that will deal with the issue of extortion. Remember, once you don't have a proactive intelligence, it will make this country to be in disaster, because those people are the ones supposed to gather the information before any criminal activity takes place. But now we are in a stage where we don't have an active crime intelligence. Secondly, if you look to the numbers of the polls that we have in South Africa, if I still recall, in 2022, we were less than 150,000 of the police officers in South Africa. Now, we've got the retrenchment that is taking place, we've got the retirement taking place, we've got those that have been dismissed at work, and yet this recruitment of 10,000 per year doesn't assist the community. Remember, one thing is this: when we employ 10,000 this year for 2025, remember that they've got another 50% that's going on retirement. It gives some loopholes in SAPS duties, that issue that should be thoroughly addressed. Thirdly, when you speak about this issue of extortion, bear in mind that not only SAPS has to play a role, all the government entities should come on board and address the issue of this extortion, because we've got a small business department that has to come on board. We've got health that's supposed to come on board so that we can iron out this issue of extortion. Now, the biggest challenge in South Africa that we're facing is the issue of lack of implementation in the policies that we're having. So thirdly, the issue of politicizing crime in South Africa is a challenge, because everybody, when start to do the good job, they will politicize the issue of crime, of which we need to get off that route. Not only in Cape Town where you find this issue. You can go to rural areas, the same issues there. Go to Gauteng, go to KZN. Now the serious matter is that it also affects the schools. Our kids cannot be able to go to school because of the extortion.
Jenni, I mean, are divisions like your crime intelligence sleeping on the job, where they perhaps adopted a devil-may-care attitude, or are they scared of these criminal networks and therefore decide to just disappear and pretend nothing's happening?
Look, I do think that it's about intelligence, but it's also about information. So you can't tell me that as a researcher, I know that there are certain days when the extortionists go into certain areas and collect money. And you can't tell me that that is intelligence information that has to be sought out, when you can speak to people in the community and you can get that information. So it doesn't make sense that we can't develop a more proactive approach to the issue. I also think that we need to recognize that this is becoming highly organized. So we're seeing people, for example, and I take an example of one particular extortionist who was killed recently from the Cape Town metropole area, who was involved in a number of other criminal activities, including cash and transit heists, but who became a major player in the extortion networks in Khayelitsha, for example. And it became as profitable for him to actually be involved in extortion as it was to be involved in some of the other organized crime activities, such as cash and transit heists. So I think we need to recognize that we're dealing with quite organized networks that are, you might have young guys going out and collecting the extortion money, but you're dealing with quite sophisticated practices and people are learning from each other. And my concern is that international practice has shown that extortion economies are easier to deal with when they first emerge. They become more difficult, not to say impossible, but more difficult to deal with as they become entrenched. And we're seeing this, like prior to COVID, to the lockdown in COVID-19, we had extortion taking place, but it was predominantly in the township economies, but it was predominantly targeting foreign businesses, and there wasn't a great deal of attention paid to that. And now those very same groups have expanded their operations to include local businesses and any trader and any business operator in the area. We see the same kind of thing in the taxi industry, where we know for years and years and years, extortion has been going on within the taxi industry with the bucket system. Now, post-COVID, it's expanded to employee transport systems, bus services, even in some cases private vehicles which are faring like lifts, clubs, etc., school transport systems. And so we kind of allow it to emerge in a particular context, and then it becomes out of control and we start wondering, how did it get this way?
To what extent, Dumisani, I mean, are these criminals terrorizing people in the township, whether it's Guguletu or Nyanga, also the same people who are involved in armed robberies in shops, but also people dealing with firearms, and we may not be talking about AK-47s here, but 9mm pistols and the like?
You know, Vuyo, in 2017 June, we had a safety plan that we're drafting for Nyanga, Philippe, and other areas. We predicted this kind of crime that year, and we said to SAPS management provincially, can we plan for this before it can come out of control? It was an issue of not taking it serious by that time. Now it's out of control. And secondly, the people that get affected are the people who are doing their own small businesses. Sometimes they get gun-pointed. Sometimes they get some letter saying that at the month end, I'm expecting you to pay this amount. If you don't, I will come to your family. I know your family. So those threats make them to feel uncomfortable in running their businesses. And it becomes an issue of having a challenge in terms of the local economy, because there's no one who will come and invest in an area where it's a no-go area in terms of the extortion. As Jenni said, it has been there, especially inside of the school transport. You will find that they have been there. This challenge, they were always get attacked and robbed, but no one took a decision attempt to address this issue until it becomes a national crisis. As it becomes a national crisis now, it needs all the government spheres and the community structures to work together to ensure that we deal with the issue of extortion. And if we don't do so, we might be finding ourselves like a headless chicken, because sometimes we don't understand what is it. I did some other short course at what was called community safety planning and implementation. Once you do that, it gives you that maybe somehow, the planning in terms of the law enforcement agencies is good, but the problem is in implementation. So if we can start to understand that once you plan, implement the right thing that you planned. But if you didn't plan, you will work hard to understand that you will be able to implement, because you didn't plan. That's how we need also to check. Do they plan very well? Or do they just implement what is in the book? They don't go and practice it before they can do it. Lastly, they are crime intelligent? Do we have people on ground who can be the informers so that they can be able to get information before things get out of control? If then no, let us ask ourselves, what is the main reason for them not to have informers? Then we get an answer there. We will be able to solve the country. But now we are in crisis really, and we don't have to run away from the fact that in the near future or in 5 years' time, we might see few businesses operating by that time, because everyone will say, no, it's rather for me not to do any business. Even the big companies might close down because the construction companies are being also targeted. It gives them a hard time to be in the same criminal activities as they are targeted. So we need to do something before the country collapses.
Dumisani, Qwebe, Jenni, Irish-Qhobosheane, let me thank both of you for coming on this evening.